Intentional and unintentional downfalls of computing. In an age where access to the internet and computers make it easier than ever to share and access information, some of these new developments have created unintended pitfalls. In general, the downfalls of computing fall into a couple of categories: intentional use of computing to do damage, and unintentional negative side effects. We will talk about examples of both. Some you are already familiar with.
Computing has changed the way that those with bad intentions can commit crimes, and brought about a new term, cybercrime. Cybercrime is a criminal act that involves the use of computer networks to commit criminal acts. Cybercrime includes fraud, hacking, identity theft, creating computer viruses, malware, phishing, cyberstalking, software piracy, cyberbullying, DOS attacks, and DDoS attacks. White hat hackers are considered to be the ethical hackers who work for companies to test their systems and protect them against attacks. Companies like to ensure that the computer and data storage systems they have created do not have any vulnerabilities, and this is where white hat hackers come into play. If you have heard the term hacker before, black hat hackers are most likely the type of hacker you were thinking of. A black hat hacker is an individual who could be responsible for writing malware, looking to bypass security protocols, and overtaking networks to access data that is not theirs. A gray hat hacker is an individual with a combination of white and black hat hackers' ethics. Gray hat hackers have all the knowledge and skills of a white or black hat hacker, but will frequently test a system's vulnerabilities without the owner's permission. If any vulnerabilities are found, a gray hat hacker may report them to the company and charge a fee for the information. Those involved in intentional cybercrime are constantly developing ways to create and disperse malware. Malware refers to a grouping of malicious software. Examples of malicious software can include viruses, worms, spyware, or ransomware. Malware is an all-encompassing term that refers to a variety of different ways computer and computer systems can be attacked. The different varieties and the type of malware determine how the system is attacked. Creating a piece of malware isn't enough to cause issues in the cyber world. An unethical user must gain access to another user's, company's, or government's systems to disperse malware. This unethical access can be gained in a number of ways: dictionary attacks, brute force attacks, phishing, keylogging, DDoS attacks, DOS attacks, and network insecurities. One of the reasons it is recommended to not use words that are in the dictionary in a password is that there are common cyber attacks known as dictionary attacks. A dictionary attack involves the use of an algorithm that has been designed to systematically enter words found in the dictionary into possible combinations for a password. The algorithm will check as many variations of dictionary words with relevant information it knows about the user, such as numbers relating to a birthday or address. Dictionary attacks are typically fairly successful, as many passwords involve words that can be found in the dictionary. A reason it is strongly suggested to never use personally identifiable information in a strong password is due to brute force attacks. A brute force attack is one of the most simple ways of attacking an account to determine a password because it implements a trial and error attack method. Software is used to generate a large number of guesses as to the value of the password based on stored information about the user. The software will generate all possible combinations of stored information gathered by virtual spaces, search history, and more to bombard a site with as many guesses as possible. Phishing is a type of cyber attack that uses disguised emails as a weapon of the attack. The goal of a phishing email is to trick the recipient of the email into thinking that they're receiving something that they want. The recipient then provides their personal information to the sender of the email, the black hat or gray hat hacker. A keylogging attack falls under the gray hat hacker's area of expertise. In keylogging attacks, software or hardware is used to track the keystrokes that a user makes on the keyboard. By knowing which keys are pressed and when, a gray hat hacker could have access to usernames, passwords, pins, and to any other information a user would type and use on a daily basis. This falls under the umbrella of a gray hat hacker's ethics because key logging is not illegal, it is unethical. The fundamental goal of a denial of service attack is to prevent legitimate users from accessing a digital system or device. There are many ways that a DOS attack can occur. One of the most common methods of carrying out a DOS attack is when an attacker floods a network server with so much traffic that the server crashes and no one can access the system. Traffic refers to packets of data sent in the form of requests to the system. With so many requests to process, a server may not be able to handle the overwhelming amount of information it has received, and so the server simply stops responding to all requests. If a network's internet service provider is impacted by a DOS attack, any connected network that relies on the ISP will lose service. A distributed denial of service attack occurs when multiple devices work together to attack one target. Since there are multiple devices used to attack a single target, there is an increased amount of attack power. DDoS attacks frequently make use of what is referred to as a botnet, which is a device connected to the internet that the attackers have seized control over to increase the number of devices on the attack. It can be challenging to identify the true source of a DDoS attack, as there can be many machines from which requests are being made. As more and more devices are created and are connected to the internet, DDoS attacks can become more prevalent. We've talked about dictionary attacks, brute force attacks, key logging, phishing, DOS, and DDoS as direct methods of cyber attacks. In public places, there is often the option to connect to a public network in order to use a wireless connection. Public networks are especially dangerous to your cybersecurity. Data that is sent across these public networks can fall prey to unethical hackers looking for users' PII. Information sent through these networks can be easily accessed through what's known as rogue access points. Once in the hands of a hacker, the personal information can be manipulated, analyzed, and modified for the hacker's purposes. A rogue access point is a different classification of access point. There are quite a few classifications of access points, but the rogue access point is essentially the bad guy. It is the access point that does not have permission to be within a network, and thus wireless users need to be wary of connecting to public networks. If a user attempts to connect to a wireless network through a rogue access point, their personally identifiable information is at risk. One example of a rogue access point is that of a hacker using a computer to give free network access at a local coffee shop. The name of the network is made and is very similar to that of the coffee shops, so that many people log into the network not knowing that every website they go to and every username and password they enter are stored by the hacker's computer for future use. So be careful. Aside from malicious computer usage, there are also unintentional downfalls in the world of computing. These include programmer bias, algorithmic bias, privacy infringement, and inequitable access to technology and the internet. One unintended problem with life in the digital age is programmer bias. Bias refers to favor given to something based on one's own prejudices or life experience. Even without trying, one's perception of the world creates bias. If programmer bias is not tempered, there can be unintended consequence. As we begin to depend more on programmed devices in the future, unchecked bias can become more serious. We see the effects of programmer bias when beta tests of new versions of software or hardware are released. The general public is a great resource for identifying programmer bias. If the programmers and initial testers of a new piece of software did not account for a group of people, a certain look, or a specific language and release their product to the public often provides this feedback. Algorithmic bias refers to systematic and repeatable errors in computer systems that create unfair outcomes, such as privileging one arbitrary group of users over another. A frequent way we see algorithmic bias affect our lives is through trending information on social media platforms. An algorithm gathers all of the information that you as a user on social media contribute. This means that the algorithm takes the topics you like, share, retweet, or comment on and adjusts what you are viewing on your newsfeed or homepage. This gives a bias to the topics you are interested in by providing you with similar information. But then we need to consider, does this show you many perspectives to a story? Another unintended consequence of your digital footprint is privacy infringement. Every site you visit on the internet is connected to you. Every purchase you make online, and even in-store purchases when using electronic payment methods, is connected to you. All of your social media posts and articles that you share create a permanent digital footprint. This footprint is used by data miners to predict the types of things you might want to see. They use this information to target ads, news pop-ups, or even suggest groups and organizations that you might like. The digital divide is another downfall of life in a digital world. The digital divide refers to the gap between those who have access to the internet and computers and those who do not. As society relies more and more on computers for working in the world and the internet to share information, those without access are at risk of being left behind. So, what factors determine whether a person has access to the internet and computers? Infrastructure, geographic barriers, government restrictions, and socioeconomic status. Infrastructure is the physical and organizational structures that exist to provide basic necessities in society. Examples of infrastructure include paved roads and highways, electrical grids, and safe systems for delivering drinking water to the population. Infrastructure also includes the hardware and systems that are necessary to provide the high-speed internet to homes, schools, and businesses. Geographic barriers also play a part in the digital divide. Even those living in countries with modern infrastructure may still lack access to high-speed internet due to geographic barriers if they live in rural areas or in areas with geographic features like mountains that make it difficult to run network cables. In some countries, governmental restrictions limit access to the internet or to certain sites on the internet. Sometimes these restrictions limit access to the internet by making access so expensive that it is unlikely that a family will be able to afford internet access. In other countries, like North Korea, the government limits access so that only certain websites are reachable inside the country. Another factor that impacts what side of the digital divide you find yourself on is socioeconomic status. Those of the population who have lower amounts of disposable income are limited in their access to connected computers. While many tout low-cost smartphones as a way to level the playing field, it is a simple fact that smartphones are not enough. As we face the inequalities of the digital divide, it's imperative to consider how it can be kept from growing. Here are some ways. Increase affordability of internet access and the devices needed to connect to the internet. Develop more infrastructure that is needed to increase connectivity globally and in challenging to reach regions. Create informational resources about how to gain lower cost devices and access to the internet and perpetrate them through non-digital avenues. What are other ways to support decreasing the digital divide?